Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today I'm going to be explaining exactly what you need to know about JavaScript in order to learn React. Now, I've made a video about this in the past and you guys really loved it. And there I went over a bunch of topics that I thought were extremely important for you to learn React. I've updated the list a little bit, and for that reason I wanted to bring this one where I'm going to be extending that list and talking about other topics that I also find extremely important for you to know before you start learning React. Now, they are not sequential, meaning that you can watch this video first and then go to the other one if you're interested in that, but I'm going to leave the link and tag that video in the description if you're interested to go and see which other topics I mentioned there as well. So before we get into the video, if you could leave a like and subscribe, I would massively appreciate it. It would help push my videos to more people, and I would be very grateful if you could do that for me. So with that in mind, let's get into the video. Okay everyone, so first thing I want to say is that this video is intended, as per the previous one, is intended for people who are either beginners in React and already started studying React, or mostly for people who currently are learning JavaScript and are thinking of transitioning to React, or even for people who haven't learned JavaScript yet and want to go directly to learning React, because you can do so by just learning specific topics such as the one I'm going to be talking in this video. So the first one that I find extremely important is to understand what the DOM is. Now, if you've been learning JavaScript for a while now, you've probably heard that acronym before, the DOM. It stands for the Document Object Model, and it is basically a representation of your web page that JavaScript can basically interact with. So essentially, it's like a tree-like structure where each node corresponds to a port of the page that is written. So each node would basically correspond to an individual HTML tag, for example, if you're familiar with HTML. Now, JavaScript can be used to do a lot with this, and its main purpose is to actually manipulate those nodes. So if you have a tag such as the header one over here, you would be able to use JavaScript to make it such that whenever you click on a button, for example, it would grab the node of this tag and change the header, so change the text that is inside. So JavaScript is actually used to add interactivity into your website by manipulating the DOM. However, one of the things I want to stress is the fact that direct DOM manipulation, so directly grabbing the node and changing its values, can be very inefficient and hard to manage, especially for like very complex applications, because imagine having to manually grab everything and change everything manually. So because of that, React was created. Now, how React exactly does this, I don't think it's fully important for you to understand in the beginning, because it might be a little bit complicated, but just getting an idea of what it means is I think is important. And what React does is it basically creates a virtual representation of the DOM. So it creates something called a virtual DOM, which is used to determine the most efficient way to make those actual changes to the actual DOM. This is good because it optimizes performance and offers a simpler way to code your projects, which is the way you actually code React. So in React, you use something called JSX instead of normal HTML, which is a mixture of actual HTML and actual JavaScript. You put JavaScript directly inside of your HTML. And the reason why you can do that is because of how React structured their virtual DOM and the way they structured the language. So it makes developing the application easier, and it optimizes the performance of your website. So to be honest, if you're confused by all of this, it's fine. I do think just getting an idea behind it in the beginning is important. You don't have to understand how React actually created the virtual DOM. You don't have to understand everything about the DOM. Just know what the DOM is. It's just an object that represents the skeleton of your website. So an object that represents all of the HTML of your website. Just that is already enough in my opinion. Okay, so the second thing I want to talk about is the import-export notation. So this is actually really quick and simple. It's just something that I actually saw a lot of people getting mistaken over, and I think is important to just understand in the beginning, just because this is how you do it in React. And it's the same in JavaScript as well, but because of JavaScript's previous versions, there's a couple ways you can import stuff. You know that in JavaScript, if you have an HTML page like this one over here, in the head, for example, you could come over here and import a script by adding a script and then just straight up adding the link to the script, right? This is how you would download an external library or something like that. Now, if you're using something like NodeJS, you could do something like this. If I wanted to import a library called Axios, I could just come over here and say const Axios equals to require Axios, right? Now, the equivalent for something like this, if you want to export a file, right, or export something in your application, you would do something like this: module.exports, and then send back something over here, like an object you created. You would send information like this by exporting it in this way. Now in React, you have another notation for this. You have the import export notation. So if I wanted to import Axios, for example, I would import it like this. I would say import Axios from Axios. And this is simpler in my opinion, and I think it's simpler in the opinion of many people. So for that reason, React actually uses it. If you want to export something, such as this object over here, you could straight up just say export an object like this, or export default, or export a const. You can do it in a variety of different ways, but both ways are correct. Both ways are part of JavaScript, but you need to understand that this is the way that React actually uses. You can't use the other way. So this is just a quick thing that I wanted to let you guys know in case you've missed this. Okay, so the third thing I wanted to talk about, and I can't believe I didn't actually add this in the previous video, is the whole concept of ternary operators and conditionals in React and in JavaScript. So you might be familiar with this because it is widely used nowadays, and it is a type of notation that I think I would never give up, and it's present in a lot of other languages as well, and it's really simple to understand as well. So the whole concept about it is condensing if-else statements into one-liners. So what I mean by that is, look at this piece of code over here. We have a very simple program, right? We have this variable called myAge, and we have a variable called isOfAge. So isOfAge is just a variable that will be true if the person is not underage, so if the person is over the age of 18, and false if the person is under the age of 18. Now my age over here is 17, so they are not over 18. So what I want to do is, in case it is over 18, I'll just set isOfAge to be equal to true, and in case it's not, we'll set it to false. Now, as of right now, this code would work perfectly, but the problem is that it takes us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of code to set the value of isOfAge to the correct value depending on the myAge condition. Now we could change this very simply by using the ternary operators. Now ternary operators and conditionals are like this. There's a question mark and there's a colon. Now their purposes are like this. This would serve as the if statement, and the colon would serve as the else statement. So basically, if I want to determine if they are over 18 or not, we could do something like this. Well, if my age is greater than 18, then return true, else return false. Now, this over here is basically this, but the only difference is it's not actually setting isOfAge to anything. It's just asking the question, well, is my age over 18? If yes, then return true. If not, return false. So if I want to actually set this isOfAge to be equal to that, I could just come over here and say isOfAge is equal to this condition over here. So we put an if-else statement inside of one line. All we're saying is if my age is greater than 18, then set isOfAge equal to true. If not, set isOfAge equal to false. Now there's an easier way to do this actually, because we could straight up just remove this and set it like this, right? Because this will return true or false anyways. But this conditional can actually be used in a lot of different situations, such as the following. An example, a very simple one, would be something like this, right? You don't have to just use it with booleans. In this case, we are using a boolean, but we're also using this string. Imagine we have some sort of button in our application where it becomes green if you answer a correct question, right? Such as like a quiz website or something like that. And it becomes red if you don't. So we have this color variable that determines the color of that button, and it's set to green. And we have this variable called isCorrect, which is set to false. Now, what we want is, in case isCorrect is equal to true, to set color to green. But if it's not, we want to set it to red. So what we can do is we can just say color is equal to isCorrect. And if it is correct, then we set it to green. But if it's not, we set it to red, just like this. And this saves us a lot of lines of code, and that's why it is important. You'll be doing this, you'll be adding conditionals and ternary operators like this directly into your HTML or your JSX consistently. So it is extremely important that you become familiar with this, and it's not that complicated to understand. There's other ways to do this as well. Like imagine you don't want to use an if else. Imagine this is actually red by default and you just want to turn it green in case it is correct. Then instead of using a question mark and a colon, you could straight up just say, okay, color, if is correct, then double ampersand becomes green. Something like this. This would return the correct value. And you can use this as well to determine if you're going to render specific components, specific parts of your code, a lot of things that are important in React. So this was it for ternary operators. It's simple, but really useful. Okay, so the fourth topic I want to talk to you guys about is the idea of optional chaining. This is a really simple topic similar to ternary operators and to the import-export statements. It's really quick, but really useful. And the reason why it's very useful is because a lot of times you will be fetching and dealing with data in React, obviously, as well as in JavaScript, but especially with React. And React will break in case you're not specific sometimes with the data you're receiving, because maybe you will try to break one of the main rules of JavaScript, which is to access fields instead of objects wherein the field doesn't exist. So what do I mean by that? Well, this is a good example of it. I have this function over here to fetch some data, right? And I'm fetching some data from an imaginary API. Right? Imagine that this API will return back the data and it will be stored inside of this data variable over here. Now imagine I want to do something with that data, such as I know for a fact that when we fetch this API, we will get back an object which will contain a field called person, which would then contain a field called name, right? And I guarantee to you guys that this is exactly what will happen. Well, inside of our app, not everything will happen in sequential steps, right? Well, for example, we might be trying to access this person and .name before data is done fetching the data. Not in this example over here, but when we're working React, we have to take that into account. So that means that sometimes in the app, we will try to access fields in objects before those fields actually exist. So when you are in a situation like that, you could tell JavaScript to only try to access specific keys from an object only if the key exists. So what do I mean by that? So we know that data will be something, right? To some extent, we have it over here, but we don't know if person will actually be an existing field. So what we can do is, before we try to access name, we can try to put a question mark over here, which will guarantee that it will only try to access name in case person exists, which means it won't break our app. And that is extremely important for you to understand, because you can actually put this everywhere you want in any object, in any time you're trying to access a key in an object, just to make sure that you're protecting your objects from this kind of error. And this is an error that is very common, and I think it's important for you to understand. It's as simple as that. It's nothing major, but also really useful. Now, continuing from this example, I want to introduce another thing, which is the idea of template literals. Now, template literals are really simple and really common in various different languages as well, but really useful in React specifically. Imagine in a situation like this, where you have a function called fetch data from this imaginary API, but inside of this API over here, you have to add a search term, which would be something that you want to search inside of this API, right? So if you're familiar with APIs, you know that you can fetch data, and depending on what you put on the params of the endpoint or the URL that you're searching for, you can search for different things. Imagine that this imaginary API will send back pictures of animals, and depending on if you write here dog or if you write here cat, it will send back into this data different pictures. It will send a picture of a dog or a cat. So imagine over here, inside of this fetch data function, we have this argument called animal name. So whenever we call fetch data, we have to specify which animal we want to search for. And inside of this imaginary API search term over here, we want to change this value depending on the animal name. Well, a lot of you guys might think, okay, what you can do is you can just remove this over here and just say plus animal name, right? What this will do is it will unite both strings and will correctly add and search the correct animal. Well, this is true, but there's an easier way to do this, which honestly I find way better, which is to use template literals. And what I mean by that is you come over here, you change the type of quotes from single quotes or double quotes to backticks. If you're not familiar with backticks, is this type of quote over here. And when you do that, you can insert JavaScript inside of your strings. So the way you do it is wherever you want to insert your string, you just add a money sign, then open and close curly braces, and immediately you see it doesn't look like strings anymore, because now you can add actual JavaScript here. And that JavaScript we're going to add is the animal name variable. And now we did the exact same thing, but in a simpler way. We don't have to add plus signs. We don't have to worry about any of that. We're just directly inserting this JavaScript inside of our string. And honestly, that was basically it. Now, I do think this is the end of all the things that you need to know about JavaScript before learning React. You might have realized it's not that much. The reason why it's not that much is because developing in JavaScript and developing in React are very different experiences. And I want to stress that out because people think they need to master a topic before transitioning and trying to progress in their development journey. Trust me when I say this is not true. Sometimes over-preparing and over-mastering will hold you down and prevent you from actually progressing. If you think I know anything about React, if you believe in my skills in React, which I think a lot of you guys do because of the extensive amount of videos I've made in the topic in the past, then you need to know that I didn't know that much JavaScript when I started learning React. I actually skipped all of that because I was too eager to start learning React before actually trying to understand JavaScript. Now, do I think I'd made the right choice? Well, it worked out in the end, right? It's not like I didn't end up learning the things that I should have learned before eventually. It might have taken a little bit longer, but I still think it's hard to measure what exactly you need to learn before transitioning to a new topic. So as my experience progressed, I was able to really understand what was useful at that time that I didn't know. And that's why I made these two videos. Now, the first one, I go over a list of topics. If you're still interested in looking at those, or if you've watched those already, I think a mix of those topics and the topics I mentioned in the video over here and the topics I mentioned in this video are necessary and enough for you to actually start delving inside of React. Now, if you've never touched React and you're going to do now that you learned all of this, keep in mind, learning is not a quick process. It's something that you keep having to go back and relearn stuff that you might have forgotten. So don't be scared to go back to this video and learn one of the topics. I divided it into chapters. So if you're still confused about something, just rewatch it and you should be good. Now, let me know if you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you enjoyed the other video about this topic as well. And let me know what you want to see next, because I really enjoy making these videos. Check out all of the stuff that I have in the description. I have all the gear I use, all of the equipments and hardware I recommend, all in the description. And yeah, that's basically it. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.